So hello, everyone. In lieu of our session at the Code for America Summit, which was planned for Washington, D.C. these past few days, March 2020, we're holding this virtual session to continue a dialogue that we've been having and share it with the people that we hope to share it with. So the title of this session is Brigade 2.0, Organizational Transformation for the Long Run in Public Interest Tech Ecosystems. And in it, you will hear from Code for America Brigades in Kansas City, Los Angeles, Miami, and New York City about each one of our public interest tech ecosystems. Each of us is going to share our brigade story of discovering a need to move beyond a volunteer-driven model and acting on an opportunity to transform our organizations into viable public interest tech entities within our cities. We're each at different stages, and we're excited to be here today to share our journey, discuss where we're at, and share what faces us in the path ahead. And then engage with you, the audience, and get your input on how we can all get there. We have been having conversations over the course of the past few months and have learned a lot from sharing with one another, and so we hope that this dialogue continues. The Code for America Brigade Network is a national alliance of community organizers, developers, and designers who all share a belief that government can work for the people, by the people in the digital age, if we all help. There's about 25,000 active members across 85 different brigades throughout the United States. It's been a model that many have been adopted to set up an organization, engage local communities, and improve local government in a sort of unified national level. Many of us, in speaking with one another, have observed that we share one challenge, which is the challenge of becoming operational and sustaining our operations, and moving from a very volunteer-driven organization to a sort of recognized, established organization that still operates under a mission of improving local government while still maintaining a very community-oriented feeling and basically supporting themselves. So in our discussions, we've discovered that we all sort of there's no clear pathways that we see to grow beyond being just a volunteer organization. We've also noticed that, grant funding and finding sponsors sometimes proves difficult when, what we are asking folks to sponsor is basically the project management, projects and tools. There's still obvious needs, but having like a core team that's funded to go after those projects requires funding, and that isn't always easy to find support for. So we're interested in sort of looking at, brigades are great models for early organizations in the beginning of their civic tech careers in a city. What is the mature model of a brigade? What does that look like? And we think there's an opportunity to share thoughts on it, begin having a more unified conversation across brigades so that, and going into the future, more and more people can sort of say, oh, hey, like I'm interested in the model that, that Kansas City is using. I wonder how we might model that, use it as a model for our own city, or like take some of their insights and learnings and use them here in our small community. So we're excited to discuss this and share insights across to share the opportunities we've discussed to connect and partner and build more of a established base in our own municipalities. So essentially, what we're going to be talking today is that feeling when your brigade is building community capacity in your city and sustaining operations is a constant challenge. So what does that feel like? How did we get there? Where are we going? What do we need to move forward? What is the Brigade 2.2? So just quickly to align everybody around the definition that we're using when we talk about sustaining our brigades and our operations, we sort of we're playing around with different definitions, but a lot of it has to do around budget and financing and building revenue streams, and then sort of developing metrics that you can report out. So we've quickly just made a sort of at a glance, not quickly, but we've made a summary of our different brigades, the groups that you'll be hearing from today. And we basically are just sort of trying to like recognize that across the brigade network, there's all different sizes of organizations, all different ages. Some of them are up to 7 years old. Some of them come from large cities. Our 4 brigades specifically probably are within the top 15 largest brigades across the network. And we're all in various different stages of becoming independent organizations. The 3 of the 4 you'll hear from today are working towards or have sort of become operational and are a bit more mature. And then 1 is working towards that. And so you'll also notice that our budgets are very different. They range from $1,000 to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we're excited to sort of share like how a brigade can operate on a shoestring budget, but how, you know, it does require quickly scaling up when you want to become mature and sustainable. So how do you do that? How can we be in positive partnerships, maintain our missions, and scale up and become established and within our communities? These are some of the questions we're asking ourselves. So without further ado, I will hand the floor over. You're going to hear short, similarly structured talks from each of us. We'll first hear from Aaron from Kansas City Digital Drive. Then I'll share on behalf of Beta NYC. Then Gregory from Code for Miami, and then Bonnie from Hack for LA. Yeah, so thank you, and here we go. Aaron, are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you, Kate. Appreciate the setup. We'll also note for everyone, there is a message chat function in Teams. So if you have questions that you want to ask, there'll be plenty of time for Q&A in live version, but feel free to type them in the conversation chat window. So we've been around since 2012 or 2013, depending on how you count, and we're there's really sort of 2 stories here. There's Code for KC, which is our brigade. This is a program that is run by the nonprofit that I run, which is KC Digital Drive. And this whole work dates back to 2011 when Google Fiber announced they were coming into Kansas City, and it spurred a whole first conversation and then set of developments here around what the tech ecosystem looks like, including civic tech and civic innovation, entrepreneurship, technology infrastructure, smart cities. There were a lot of these things that were really linked for us from the beginning. Our organization, KC Digital Drive, and my own involvement in this dates back to this clip art playbook, which may not scream, digital economy, was a product of a mayor's bi-state task force, and there was sort of a top-down, mayor's level of planning. And then there were a lot of grassroots community organizing stuff that I was doing, and it came together in a regional plan around technology innovation, and ultimately led to KC Digital Drive starting as an organization, first as an initiative with our MPO, and then in 2014 we incorporated as a nonprofit. But the brand is a little bit older. There were a whole series of plays and suggested things that we do in this playbook in education, healthcare, telecom, infrastructure-related stuff. But one particular call-out was around government innovation. And we had Code for America Fellows. It was, I think, the first bi-state fellowship. I should point out we are a regional organization and initiative. So Kansas City, Missouri is the center city, but we work on both sides of the state line with multiple counties. And very much have a regional focus to how we think about data. So our brigade starts in 2013. We are helping to organize that, put on our first National Hacking Day event, and the brigade really grew for a little bit and then sort of dwindled. And it was late 2013-14 when we stepped in as an organization, working with Paul Barham, who was the volunteer captain at the time, and said, "Hey, do you want to align more closely? We have these whole organizational set of resources that we're building, and it really fits the model of what the brigade is trying to do, but with a little bit different scope." So this is kind of our organizational approach. It is around community building, identifying opportunities where technology can help address civic problems, building those projects and implementing, and then doing the results tracking and the storytelling. And that's hard. It's a lot. We don't do it all the time. We don't do it all well. But that was sort of the model that our organization was created with. And I think that you can definitely see the brigade model, sort of how that fits in there. As we've been building, and this is actually a fairly recent, it's not, I have a designer actually working on this right now, another not pretty graphic, but we've started to repackage our programming in this way and to really identify this Solutions Lab program, again, which Code for KC is a part of, but that is focused both on the community building and the project delivery side of things, and really working a lot on identifying opportunities for projects. And so we have other, Code for KC is the resource that is really tapping into community civic tech volunteers, but we also do this in the university space, in the corporate space, in the education space, both for a variety of stakeholders that we're working on problems for, in addition to local government, and a variety of resources that we bring to the table. So that I think is one thing that I'll kind of call out as a unique part of the model, is really couching the kind of work that we do at Code for KC, but broadening it to a much wider universe in some ways, and framing it a little bit different so that our fundraising efforts are I hope more expansive and ecosystem oriented. So a few things just sort of operationally for us. Code for KC then is a program of ours, has a core team of 7 people that manages it. We have one part-time staff person who right now is me. We've had other staff people who have been kind of a maybe 15 to 25% staffer that have helped and worked with Paul Barham, who is the volunteer captain, who on his own probably puts 10 to 15 hours a week in, and without whom we would really struggle to do what we've done. We've also had a Vista, an AmeriCorps Vista volunteer at various times that has helped with brigade specific capacity. For us as a 501c3, we have a 6-member board. We have ex officio positions from the cities and some other corporate and university leaders that make up our board of directors. And then we have a whole array of other programs that we run. So just like we've got this, 7 core team sort of management structure for Code for KC as a program, we've got a leadership team for our Metro Lab work with universities. We've got a steering committee for US Ignite, which is more corporate and entrepreneur focused. And then we've helped set up some other sort of committee structures. So we've got a lot of mechanisms in place to help match make between grassroots community efforts, neighborhood organizations, and individuals, and leadership through different levels of the city. In terms of our activities, we do weekly hack nights. We get 20 or 30 people a week. We've probably got 10 projects going on right now, which is about typical. We have a couple big annual events that we've sometimes aligned with Code Across and National Day, that we sort of loosely structure our project launch cycle around. In terms of budget, this is a little bit of a tricky story, and I think it is for everyone, because there are a lot of different dimensions of how we think about how we budget. So to Kate's point, there is probably about $5,000 or $6,000 out of pocket that from the beginning we funded just out of our other revenue sources as an organization. So for us in particular, part of the effect of putting Code for KC as a program in a larger bucket of similar programs means that it's hard to break out sort of what are specifically brigade costs sometimes, other than, like our pizza and our drinks for hack night, which is maybe 150 or 200 bucks a month. We've got a co-working space that donates space to us, but that's probably a $10,000 or $15,000 budget item that we would have to cover if they were to stop doing that. So it's important, as we've prepared our organizational budget and things, to kind of think through, make sure we account for that. There's a lot of in-kind benefits that we get. We've got, event costs, printing costs, but then our other overhead costs, like our office costs, our organizational IT costs, legal, HR, that are really baked into the KC Digital Drive budget. We don't necessarily separate those out for Code for KC. So, we're probably spending about $5,000 out of pocket for Code for KC. If you include all the in-kind plus the staff time, it's probably closer to a $50,000 to $75,000 budget right now. Our target as we fundraise for Code for KC as a program is $150,000, and that is, and this is a new fundraising project for us, sort of a entire solutions lab budget that funds all of these different activity streams at about $600,000. So we are just kicking that off like Q1 of this year, and I'm not sure that the current stock market situation is going to help us, but maybe it will. We'll see. I won't spend a lot of time on impact areas. I think people, these are similar across brigades in terms of the kind of projects we work on, but happy to talk about that more in the Q&A. And to close, I would just say from a lessons learned standpoint, we again started with the need for dedicated capacity. So at the very beginning, my objective with our organization was to build organizational capacity to provide some of the backbone structure for these sorts of community efforts. The work that we do in problem discovery and resource alignment, while the civic tech ecosystem and the brigades in particular are focused on sort of hackers and volunteers and community meetups, the rest of the process, the discovery workshop, the project canvases, how we align our projects, there are a lot of other resources that can fit into that. So that's kind of been our model as we think about our organization. We also have been largely motivated by the fact that you'll get other national programs. We'll work with US Ignite, with Metro Lab, with Mozilla, and there is a tendency for local resources and leaders to kind of see a national person who's paying attention to them, and be like, oh, we need to devote our resources there, and then tap sort of the same local ecosystem elements that may already be deployed somewhere else. So part of what our mission is also is to kind of aggregate those and have a place where we don't need to reinvent the wheel each time somebody from a national perspective comes in with a new solution. And for that reason, we've really seen the need for local leadership and local sharing about how those things work. So that is our short story. I think we're going to go through all the presentations and do questions at the end, but I will hand it back to Kate and let her correct me if I am incorrect in that.
Yeah, sounds great. All right, I'm going to share my screen now. 1 second. Stop sharing now?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Okay, so, all right, so I'm going to speak on behalf of Beta NYC. I joined Beta in NYC last year, a little over a year ago, and I had been involved a bit with Civic Tech, but was largely unfamiliar with the structure of the organization and its ties to Code for America. So my perspective is unique in that it's fairly new, and Noel, who's our executive director, has been a driving force in New York City for Civic Tech and has been a large part of the Code for America network. So he'll be joining us later for Q&A. He's on the call as well, but just sort of sharing that my perspective is much newer, and so I hope to share a new perspective in that sense. So Beta NYC Civic Tech organization based in New York City. We started out as a meetup of civic technologists that came together to help build a foundation for people who were advocating, hacking, and leading in the civic tech community. They largely were coming together around the open data law that passed in 2012. A lot of good government groups were identifying a clear need for civic tech organizations to exist. So the Beta NYC joined the Brigade network shortly after Hurricane Sandy, and largely out of seeing that there was a bunch of people coming together and doing solidarity relief work. And so that sort of helped galvanize a group of people that were interested in this work. And from there, Beta NYC set out to outline needs within New York City and wrote and published them in the People's Roadmap to a Digital New York City, which outlined needs for civic tech literacy and programming for New York City to sort of update its digital capacities. Through all of this, an important partnership was formed with the Manhattan Borough President, Gail Brewer, who invited Beta NYC into her home in her office. And that began a relationship with CUNY, which is colleges City of New York. And that began our fellowship program, which is based out of the Manhattan Borough President's office. And we were invited to lead a class of students from CUNY schools and basically help form the next sort of generation of civic tech leaders and help fill the need for civic tech talent in the civic tech pipeline. So Gail Brewer was a key force in that because she saw the need for a pipeline of civic tech talent. And so we started in 2015 the first class of Civic Innovation Fellows. And through that, we began to build tools, with community boards. A lot of the work that they were doing was facing community boards and identifying needs that they had. So out of that, our different projects came about. At that point, we were leading up to that point, we were hosting a lot of hack nights within the city. But we began to pivot because we saw that, people were more interested in sustained engagement or one-time events. So the Civic Innovation Fellowship program sort of took over as the thing that we were doing that was creating tools and projects and helping fill needs within the city. And then other things like National Day of Civic Hacking served as a sort of tent pole for bringing communities together to do data jams, hackathons, or large conferences like New York City School of Data that help bring people together and to sort of serve as a space within New York City that people could come and share and learn together. So from around 2015 or so, our team grew and our Civic Innovation Fellowship became a sort of formalized program. And from there, we were able to then start doing more engagements like School of Data, and more engagements with community boards. And through all this, we created relationships with different people in the city and became sort of, the people running from department to department to elected officials' office to community board office. And we saw we were able to then start taking on contracts with folks at the Department of Education, for instance, with their Computer Science for All program. And I'll speak about that briefly. But largely, our story has been it's been a journey of starting as a small group of people, and I think the common thread about it is the people that are coming together and the foundation of trust that we have been building through all of these engagements and through our sort of public-facing, government-facing, community board-facing, and very people-centered approach to civic tech. So there's 4 values that were set out in our sort of manifesto: the freedom to connect, the freedom to learn, the freedom to innovate, and the freedom to collaborate. And these have been a driving force in all of the activities and work that we do, and with the people that we do them with. So our key activities are, as I mentioned, the Civic Innovation Fellowship Program, which engages around 12 students each year through their school year in learning and becoming, taking them through a boot camp that's designed to be a sort of civic tech analyst boot camp in the fall in their first semester, and then in the second semester they're onboarded onto different projects that Beta NYC is collecting. And things have emerged out of that, such as our data assistance request platform, which is a way for folks within the office that we sit in, that's the Manhattan Borough President's office, a way for their office to a way for us to field requests from them to help with data assistance. And often these lead to little tools and projects that our fellows then take on. We also do a lot of advocacy and research through community events, whether it's holding an event for a community around bike laws and street safety, or whether it's Noel in his office talking to folks and sort of enlightening people on, what's going on in civic tech and the needs for good government and open policies. A lot of events and engagements. I would say our structure is a little different. We don't have regular hack nights, as I mentioned. We have some series of events, and then we have our sort of tentpole events around School of Data during Open Data Week in the springtime, and then in the fall, National Day of Civic Hacking. And then the other sort of key activity we see ourselves doing a lot is sort of just community leadership, sort of helping spearhead the civic tech community forward. Folks we work with, we do a lot of work with students, whether it's our fellows or public New York City public school, high school, and middle school students through the Hack League program, advocates, community groups, community boards, council members, educators, some small businesses, nonprofits. So, a large group of folks that we are working with on a continued basis. Some of the tools that we have built and are continuing to build and use and share, whether it's with community boards or embedded in our curriculum with the Department of Education and their teachers who are teaching their students. We create tools that are focused on a need. Board staff, for instance, fulfilling a need for community board members to be able to quickly look at 311 data and understand it in their community. So tools are one thing. As I mentioned, events and engagements in New York City, we see, one challenge of having hack nights is just getting people there on a weekly basis. People are spread out all over. So instead, we've started a regular series called Beta Bagels, which is a way for folks to come and eat breakfast and hang out at the Manhattan Borough President's office for an hour or two in the morning and meet people who are doing technology work in the city. So the latest one we had, for instance, was an introduction to the new position for the Algorithms Management and Policy Officer, and sharing out, why this position was created and who they are looking to hire, and having a discussion around decision-making tools such as that they will be overseeing. We also have regular open data trainings, which is work that we do with community boards largely, but also invites the public. And often we find that our partnering with council members who we are funded with through the discretionary funding, we partner up with them to host events in public spaces like libraries or community board offices. And then we invite community boards within their districts as well as the public to these trainings. And they essentially are helping fill the gaps within government and the public's digital literacy abilities. And then lastly, just collaborations. We try to expand outside of New York City and engage with other civic tech and public interest tech folks at a national and international level. So one thing I think that, and this I guess lost its title, but it should just say Hack League. One thing that I think is unique is that we have partnered up, and this is something that I think would like to do more of, is these sort of partnerships with departments and agencies that allow us to share our curriculum and our tools with folks who can then sort of help spread the civic tech, our civic tech tools and sort of community work. So Hack League is a program that engages students in their computer science classes in civics. We introduce students to the New York City Open Data Portal, or introduce teachers to the New York City Open Data Portal, who then introduce their students to it in a one-day design-a-thon, where the students are sifting through and exploring data and identifying issues in their community. And then we host a series of hackathons in each borough, where students then engage in their computer science classes. Their teams come from their computer science classes, and they work together to address one of those issues that they've identified. So this is something that we see as really great, because not only are we engaging with New York and New Yorkers and the future of civic tech, but it's a great channel for sharing civic tech and applying it to other initiatives that the city is sort of bolstering and putting funds into. So our budget story. We started out, with a small grant in 2013 from Code for America, and things were for a few years sort of in that way, small grants out of pocket and small work here and there. In 2016, we received a grant and started working under in partnership with the of New York, which has been a great platform for us to operationalize our work and become a nonprofit. We received space from the Manhattan Borough President's Office through our partnership with Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, which has been critical in our ability to stay in conversations and dialogue with people that are making decisions. And it's also been great in, and I'm just gonna, I need to hurry up, I guess, it's running out of time. But so these were sort of two things that really stuck out in our budget story history. And since then, I think through these two things, we've sort of been able to put ourselves on a level where we were able to then apply for like a loan grant, a grant from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, which was then able to help support our core operations and staff, and allowed us to use other smaller revenue streams that we're constantly trying to build, whether it's through contracts with community boards, contracts with the DOE, use those revenue streams to then fund and create a sort of feedback loop from our Civic Innovation Fellowship program, where we're paying interns and then taking any interns that want to come back and be mentors, sort of as part-time staff with us, using those small funds to feed that. We also go after discretionary funds, and any events that we do, we invite sponsors to support. But so largely we're, moving away from small grants and trying to figure out how we can continue to sustain a core team, because that really is what is the backbone of Beta NYC right now. It's a team that sort of is every day coming and helping keep things in motion. So for us, I was speaking with Noel the other day, and it's really finding that wind. And our wind has been Gail Brewer, the Fund for the City of New York, and Code for America's overarching support and network. And we're interested in seeing, how can that, especially with Code for America, how can that be, how can we innovate that, or how can we evolve that, what that looks like as we are sort of maturing even more. Our storms or our challenges, sustainable funding, continuing to develop partners and allies, bridging the digital and technological divide amid fast-paced innovation culture within New York City, and staying really aligned to our mission while, funding ourselves. I mentioned our crew. We have 4 key staff members who are on salary. We have fellows. I think this year it's around 9 or 10 of them. And then we have mentors that come back, so 2 of them part-time. And then we have 2 part-time project consultants. And then our partners and our awesome volunteers that help out at events that we have. Going into the future, as we've all mentioned, we are looking to continue to build more revenue streams that allow us to not only not just have to seek out grants and spend all our time doing that, but actually, become more established in New York City and seen as a standalone organization that is doing meaningful work and able to fund the operations of it. So that is Beta NYC. Thank you. I'm going to give the floor over now to Gregory from Code for Miami.
Thank you. Let's see here. So can you guys see my screen? I believe you can. All right, so I have about 7 slides for you about Code for Miami Incorporated. We're a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and while we strive, like Code for America, which is our strategic partner, but whom we're independent from, to digitally transform the way public and community sector is being served here in the community, we also do it in a unique way. So we are 2 brigades, and if anybody's on this call and they're asking what's a brigade, it came from this idea of fire brigades. So essentially these group of people that are trained and mobilized to extinguish fires. And government has a lot of fires right now. We can see with the big coronavirus scare, there's a lot of fires happening, and as a result there's miscommunication, there's a lot of information out there, and how can you civically engage people so they're informed and educated to make the better decisions and build digital services that are reliable. So that's kind of like the heart of Code for Miami. And we started in 2013, like Hack for LA as well as Beta NYC. And it was actually started by Ernie Heesing and Rebecca Monson, who were the 2 founders of the organization. And it started, like many other brigades, as a meetup. And it was a direct result of our first ever National Day of Civic Hacking, where we kind of experimented with this idea of building prototypes using public data and trying to make civic technology more accessible to Miami-Dade County residents here in South Florida. We then began to change and morph over the course of years to become a 501c3 organization. I'm going to share a little about that, but I want to quickly share how we look at some of our key activities and stakeholders when thinking about Code for Miami. And for me, I break it up into kind of 4 core groups. One is the municipal groups, which is our local government. 2 is the nonprofits. 3 is the funders. And then 4th is big tech. And we kind of have multiple expectations of each of these groups. For instance, when we work with our local government partners, they want to kind of leverage us around civic engagement. And most of our activity is around civic user testing. So creating these groups that test existing or soon to be launched web apps, or even mobile apps. 2 is around Hack 101. This is an introductory course we do around training residents and people that are non-technical about how to work with data, design, and build their own tools. And 3 is around our open source projects. And we kind of break down our key activity as, hey, let's look at all these stakeholders and let's see how we can continue proving value to not only get revenue, but also create these stories that can continue helping us grow our volunteer organization. Over time, we've had to shift the way we organize to become less volunteer-based and more practice-based, where we're focused on specific areas of civic engagement and technology. and driving more projects and products with our partners. So over the couple of years, we've had a long funding cycle. So I'm pulling up some data that I had to do a lot of like accounting work for. And in the beginning, we were funded like many other groups through Code for America, where most of the money was going towards pizza, which in turn we used to create events, which in turn focused on projects. We started as a meetup group, but in 2015, we turned into this nonprofit corporation that was kind of like waiting and pending tax exemption status. In 2016, we shifted to have an LLC entity, which supported us in our work through one of the founders, through kind of funneling for-profit money and then donating the remains to this 501c3, which is primarily through our Civic user test group. And recently, last year, we had to go through a whole process of rethinking about organizational process. And this year, under my and the rest of the team's work, we've been able to shift the way we operate to focus less on projects and less on volunteer work and more on programs. So how are we funneling programs to educate and help our partners? And this has combined us to have like 3 main funding sources that for the first time is not from one organization in specific, but through donations, grants, and revenue. So what are some of the lessons that we've learned? If you're thinking about doing this civic tech work, if you're thinking about becoming a brigade or not a brigade, some of the things we had to learn the hard way is the problem we faced was like local perception. So in the beginning, I'd go and say, Code for Miami does this. And a lot of people would say, oh, you guys are like a meetup or just a college CS group, which they liken to other groups in the area. For us, we saw it as a lesson to establish more of a brand of being an independent entity and business that actually does tangible work. That way people can kind of mostly identify more with what we do that separates us from those groups. 2 is through funding hurdles, where we looked at us kind of like, there's a lot of money out there, and we kept being perceived because of our strategic relationship with Code for America, which is not us. And we exist in a place where Knight Foundation, which is one of, I think they funded over millions of dollars to Code for America to create their network team or pay network staff and network efforts. We kept kind of getting confused there as Code for Miami and saying to Knight Foundation, hey, we're separate groups. So the way we kind of eliminated that and learned from that is establishing our own revenue model. That way we don't have to depend on funders, and we can use funding as a thing that is nice to have, but not a must have. 3, looking at lack of processes and business model. So as a volunteer brigade, we were very focused on events in the last couple of years, but as a result, some of the really meaty projects that we were working on never got to be delivered because there's not enough resources to build out an idea and to keep it going. Lastly, I look at that as, hey, let's create roles and responsibilities and have more programs in place. And then it's around just financing and operations. A lot of people think your tech organization focus on tech. What we realize is that we need to have an operational and financial structure and a business model in order to sustain yourself. And as a brigade that's been around for 7 years, we wanted to transform the way we operate. So in 5 or 10 years, we don't have to worry on Code for America. Code for America can just be like a family member, which we go back to and say, hey, this is the things we've learned. Let's share resources. So that's where we see it going. And we see it as, are we project-based or product-based? And this is a big conversation, I think, across many brigades where you're trying to identify, should we act as consultants or should we be vendors of local government? For us, what we've done is we say we have this nonprofit entity which acts as a consulting group that has a fee-for-service model with community organizations while partnering with local government. But we also have this for-profit entity which works as a vendor with these government entities that can kind of work together. So separate entities, but through the for-profit, we can fund the nonprofit. And the nonprofit does separate work that doesn't encourage or has any relationship with a for-profit entity, but it kind of creates this hybrid model, which we think is going to be the future of how we operate for the next 5-10 years and change how we work and do impact. So just to wrap up really quickly, I think some of the challenges and impact we've seen is we've worked with government partners to establish stronger, firm relationships. We're sitting down in the IT buildings and they're letting us in the room to sit down with their teams to establish better ways of understanding their processes. Therefore, we can take these projects and start working on it if there's funding opportunity through grants. We then look at community partners as a part of our program setting where we work with these nonprofits and organizations just community focused around some development or digital service work. And then we focus more on practice-based initiatives. So we're not trying to be everywhere. We're trying to be focused on what's the smart city of the future going to look like, and how can we leverage digital services and the work that we've been doing already to do that around areas like affordable housing or climate change or transit. And then right now our structure is we have the director where I stand, we have a PM or program leader that leads out in Fort Lauderdale and then in Miami. And then adjacent to that, we have community organizers and developer advocates. That way we splice it into kind of like non-technical role and then technical role. So if we need engineers, we can do that. And then the PMs at the highest level have experience in both areas. So that's how we're kind of following our program. Where we see the future of this going is we have a tech roadmap, and it's based on one of the City of Coral Gables here in Miami, in South Florida. They have like a big smart city initiative. We kind of look at their tech roadmap as where we want to be, where we recognize there's a role for kind of like a GIS and records data marketplace and what they call a data bus. And what we're trying to do on the bottom side of this is build our applications that can sync to these data sources to essentially make us more adjacent to what smart cities are going to look like, and insert ourselves as long-term partners for not only just exploring this, but working with residents so they can be informed and engaged about how the privacy or ethics or anything really related to how the future of like technology is going to look in the cities that they live in. So now I'm going to give my screen up to Bonnie.
Sorry, I was on mute. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, hi, I'm Bonnie from Hack for LA, and we are a baby compared to the development of the other 3 brigades that you just heard about. But in many ways, we're much farther ahead than the majority of the brigades in the network. This is really a very small group of brigades that have come this far. And it includes ones that are not represented here today, like Code for Charlotte. But we're just starting on the path to some of the same destinations that Code for Miami, Beta NYC, and KC are on. So our story is that we started as a series of community listening and user-centered design workshops and hackathons and partners with the mayor's office and other players in the civic tech ecosystem in Los Angeles. This is obviously the mayor tweeting about us, and this is a picture of him with one of our shirts on back when that was our logo. We had a lot of influential and powerful partners, and the original founders of the organization were very effective at making these partnerships and putting on these large-scale events. In the years that followed, we evolved into a hack night structure. That's me with one of the 3 rooms that we have on one of our 3 hack nights, and our badges, our makeshift badges where we get people to donate. It's very bootstrappy, and our boards where we do effective work. The reason why we evolved into this hack night structure was that there wasn't a lot of actual change happening from the big events that we were doing. They were useful, they were great for press, they were good for relationships, but there was no long-term lasting impact on the city. And so the hack night was born, and it started out as 1 hack night. Now we have 3. And they're in downtown Los Angeles, South LA, and Santa Monica, which is a beach city. And you can see by this map that they're all it seems like they're clustered, but those locations are actually an hour-and-a-half commute from each other in traffic. And we get people as far away as the top of the map, which is North San Fernando Valley, to as far east as Pomona and as far south as Long Beach. So we reach the county's 10.16 million population across almost 5,000 square miles. And we could probably launch another 5 or 6 hack nights and still it would be a significant commute for many people. Our key activities in the stakeholder landscape, our governance structure is undergoing some changes right now. As you heard with the other brigades, they evolved over time. We're studying what's worked for other brigades with similar goals. And our community partners and stakeholders portfolio has been on a rapid rise over the past 12 months. Almost all of these partners, except for 2, are new. And that is because we put a lot of attention on providing some tangible impact on the marketplace so that we could convince people of our story. So in addition to the hack nights that we do, like I said, 3 hack nights a week, we also do events and engagement. On the top left, you will see a team that is all high school, junior, and sophomores. This is the first ever high school team for us, and they are working on a platform to help kids build mobile websites for their schools, and this will be rolled out across LA County with an internship to try to replace STEM internships with the typical summer job of working at a fast food joint. We also, of course, participate in National Day of Civic Hacking, and we have some partner events like the Open Climate Collaborathon that we do with Yale, which is actually growing into a bigger project after last year's successful venture. By the way, that team of high school students, we were at an event called Explore Tech LA where we were demoing the concept of our team to other high school students and their teachers to talk about how kids can get involved in STEM. That's the whole purpose of the conference. And my students basically built 3 workshops, designed them themselves, and then delivered a speech and the workshops, and did all of the guiding of the students in the workshops. And the facility was originally supposed to provide laptops, and you'll see in that picture there's a stack of laptops. Those were all provided by the students themselves. When I told them that the Title I kids, would not likely have access to technology during the workshops, they were incensed and rounded up all their own laptops to bring them. And that's the level of dedication that we see from volunteers, from high school students up to retirees. Our budget story, well, it's pretty sad actually. I don't know what it was before 2119. In fact, a lot of the history of the brigade is lost to me because we don't really have proper documentation. And so this is what I know. In fact, I had to get a lot of the history of our brigade from our Twitter feed in order to do this slide deck. In 2019, we had $11,000. Some of that was from the county supervisor's office to help us launch the South LA Hack Night. And another 5,000 was a grant that one particular project brought in from the Mozilla Foundation. And we received $100,000 of in-kind donation. And that is basically just for space. That's how we value that. That does not include any of the leadership time. I've been working for the organization since October 2018 when I joined as a volunteer. And I do not have a day job. I literally donate 100% of my time, and I work about 90 hours a week. So that's not calculated in there either. In 2020, it got worse because we've only raised $1,000. We did that through Giving Tuesday. We still have that $100,000 donation, but now 2/3 of it, which is our facility downtown, our largest facility, where we have 50 people show up every week. And once a month when we do onboarding for new volunteers, we get another 40 people, so 90 people. And that facility has indicated that they're not going to host us after June. So finding a new facility seems to be especially difficult. And most of our successful project teams come out of the downtown location. So the instability of brigades not having a paid staff and or budgets for things like space leads to a lot of momentum can be lost. So most people volunteer to solve specific problems, not build an organization for no pay when they can be earning a living doing it. Most experienced nonprofit employees are underpaid and overworked. They do not have much time to volunteer. So even though we've recruited from those communities, and we do have some very kind volunteers who help us with grant applications and things like that, it's few and far between, and not even remotely the same number of hours that we get from other kinds of volunteers. So many software volunteers are willing to trade their software development labor for becoming better at their craft, becoming more employable, giving back to the community, being part of the community. So that's another reason why we have focused more on projects. So it leaves us with the obvious solution of needing to pay people to help in the following areas: fundraising, external event organizing, marketing, administration, and automate all the things that we can. So we're looking across the board at things we do in a repetitive way, and we've launched our own application called VRMS, Volunteer Relationship Management System, that is seeking to help us define metrics around the volunteers, what they value, when they make use of resources that we provide, so that we can make data-driven decisions about how best to serve our community. So we've made a lot of impact, though. Because the greater story is what's happened to our volunteers. When we help people get their first jobs in tech and stay in tech, which is a real problem in communities of color and with women on the job in the tech workspace. We help young people and people returning to the workforce to find where they fit in the current tech ecosystem. We have people as young as 15 joining, and as people as old as 72. We help diversify the tech workforce. Every day we're giving somebody who is potentially going to leave before they even get their first start, we are helping them to get into their first job by providing projects that are substantial, with substantial partners like the LA Department of Transportation or LA City Attorney's Office, and having them be able to put that on their resume, have them work in teams, have them learn Get Flow, all of the things that are important to employers in the tech workspace. But what I didn't say though here is that in 12 months, we've launched 12 projects and had 8 product shipments from those projects. We're screaming, we're really screaming. And where all the other brigades have really put their time into creating the organizational structures, I've chosen to put our time into the projects with the idea that it would help us make friends and it would show the proof of what we're capable of, because we really are overcoming the stigma of being an all volunteer labor force. I recently had a meeting with somebody fairly high up in the city's information architecture structure, and she mentioned the revolving door of volunteers and also the quality of volunteers. And it was hard to hear, but I already had been saying that. So it was at least good to get confirmation that people see us like I think they see us. So impact we want to have is create a sustainable infrastructure. And that means basically creating a structure that should I move on, the whole organization does not fall apart, that we don't go back to what we were before I arrived, which was a lot of community-centered projects, but not ones with any stakeholders and not really ones that were creating significant impact. Define with hard numbers the impact we're having on our volunteers so that we can share that with government, tech companies, and communities, this better model for workforce development in the tech sector. We've looked at workforce development across Los Angeles, and the workforce development centers that populate Los Angeles, they really work well if you're a warehouse worker. They don't work well if you're a tech worker. And then developing a system for measuring the impact from our current crop of projects. How many youth experiencing homelessness did we get into homes? How many car trips did we reduce? How many websites did we identify that had exclusive language, and how many changed to be more inclusive? Were we able to create higher levels of engagements at neighborhood councils? So many of our projects are doing the crucial work of community engagement and addressing LA's biggest issues, from homelessness to discrimination. So how are we structured? Well, would you believe blood, sweat, and tears? That's really what it's taking right now. We have a very loose governance structure. There's no requirements for participation. You know, we don't even all get together physically in person, and people just kind of put in as much time as they have, and then they remain on leadership and you know, and start curtailing their time as their lives and responsibilities change. One of the things that I've heard from a lot of the brigades, not just the ones here today, is that they, you know, some of them have elections, some of them have terms. And what we're finding is that people have about a 3-month window where we can get a lot of time from them, a lot of passion, a lot of commitment. And then even if they join leadership, it tapers off after 3 years. I don't know if that's unique to Los Angeles and the pace of our economy here, or if that is across the board happening. But we're rarely getting people, other than software development professionals who are retired, who are interested in committing over the long term. So we do have some long-term volunteers inside of our development staff. Like we have someone who is basically an architecture and infrastructure advisor, and he is long-term committed. We have another person who acts as the kind of anchor team lead on several different projects, getting younger people younger and newer developers up to speed, so that they can take over those roles on teams and then moving on to other teams. But from the organizational development perspective, we are not getting that type of person showing up. So right now, it just kind of, it does seem very insecure, and it does seem like you're driving a car without power steering. Okay. So what challenges are we focusing on right now? Well, we've been applying for funding like crazy, and we're terrible grant writers apparently, because we're not really getting that. We are figuring out how to tell our story, whether it's focusing on workforce development, or the impact that we're having on the city. That's what we're learning how to do. Where would we like to be in 10 years? We'd like to still be here. And I think that is very much in question. Not that there won't be something called Hack for LA, but what will it look like? That's really an unknown now, given the instability of the network. And then what would you like to know that you needed to know now? I've been at it so little time, it's hard to answer that question. I just became the captain about 4 months ago. And I just joined in 2018. I think I would have liked to know exactly how much time it was going to take. And then what would you like to know that you didn't know you needed to know? Yeah, I don't even know what that question means. Sorry. And then how did you want to, there's 3 questions associated. Well, I'm going to skip all that and go right to questions because we're already kind of, I think, running over time. So that's, I'm going to turn my screen over to Kate.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, and Gregory and Aaron. That was really great. So I do have one last slide that let me just refresh it, share my screen. And then anyone who is joining us right now, if you have any questions, please add them to the chat. I've also included a link to a Slack channel on Code for America's Slack that we created called Brigade 2.0. So we'd love to continue the dialogue there with you. I think that's pretty much. Why can I not share? Oh, there we go. 1 second.
There's a question from Michael from Oakland for you, Bonnie. And I think that's a pretty good measure. And I'll take a shot at answering from our perspective. I think the 3-month window is like project, and we get similar, like people who might come, like we have weekly hack nights. So we might get people who are, there every week or every other week for a 3 or 4 month period, and really have, especially like we'll get people that are between jobs and searching. So you get like an intensive project focus. And then I think there's another group who like will stick around, and it's maybe not just that project focus, but will like, and I see this in other kinds of like professional leadership groups too, like people that join like, the board of the AMA or something like that, that want to kind of spread their time around in terms of how they commit to an organization. I do see some 3-year like, oh, we'll stick around, but then, they might not be there for like 5 or 10 years. So for us, even though I see, Bonnie, now that you've said 3 months and maybe you didn't have the latter in mind, I do think there is a, like at a leadership level, how long, I mean, we have longer term volunteers too. Paul's on and he's been around for like 6 years. And our core team, I think, has been around for a long time, but there is a shelf life, I think, for how you turn over your leadership too.
Yeah, and if I can follow up, so when I said 3 months, there are people who've been around for longer, but their efficacy is about 3 months. So some people have been around for years, much longer than I've been in the brigade. I see them in the pictures on our Twitter feed, but they come and they go. They're not here for a year. They show up to a couple of meetings. Some of those people are on our leadership team. And they, are sometimes there for the meetings, sometimes not, but there's not a lot of sustained activity like there is in that first 3 months.
If I could join the conversation.
Another question from Thomas Deckert. What was the process for getting city buy-in and use of the data assistance request tool? Speaking to Beta NYC's data assistance request. I will, so we work out of the Manhattan Borough President's office. So we're seeing folks every day that are working in land use or in departments within our office. And so we're constantly having a dialogue with them, and some things will come up, for instance, in our weekly staff meetings with their chief of staff, like we are making a map and need to find this data. And so when enough of those had happened, Emily and Noel decided that they would formalize that process for asking for data assistance and create just a simple form. And so we've been testing it out. And I think in the past year, Noel, if you're there, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's been about like 30 requests, all of them fulfilled like in the past year or so.
It's a light. If you go to beta.nyc and look under our projects, you can find the data assistance requests. The more or less our activities of working and engaging with Civic Innovation Fellows, we found ourselves essentially in a position where we would get these little one-off requests of like, can you crunch this open data? Can you analyze? Can you scrape this data set? Like, how do I find this one piece of information? And the DARs, the data assistance requests, is a formalization of that tech support aspect. And so building trust was along the aspect of we were in the office, we were meeting weekly with the senior staff of the Manhattan Borough President's office. We were meeting also with the various staff members, and they just found themselves in a situation where they needed some casual assistance to answer some information. It would be like, hey, what information is on the open data portal that's pertaining to this particular question? And then we would go answer that. And then we realized after about 6 months that this was more or less a tech support function. So we now meet with city council members to be like, hey, we have this capability. Let us know how we can help you. Great. Is there another question?
Those are all the questions. All right, then. Aaron, if you're We can't hear you.
Oh, were you going to say something, Gregory, in answer to Michael's question?
No, I was
and Bonnie's answer.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, 3 months. I think it's the way we look at it is like acquisition of a new person. You have to like educate them and get them a task. The way we see it here, at least, or the way I perceive it here in Miami and South Florida, is people are coming because they want to do a task. And if they like that task, then they'll feel like they may need to come back or feel attached to a project. And I think a part of what we do is, through our volunteer sign up, gauge what their interest is. And immediately off the bat, based on their interest, try to see if we can give them something of value. That way we can get that 3 months of activation going for them. And based on that, if they're willing, they may come back or they may not, but at least we've gotten like a valuable exchange of getting somebody there. So I think for a lot of brigades, it's like, how do you look at volunteers? I think that's important to it, because what we've seen is the drop-off rate typically happens and people feel like they're not getting a lot of value out of the work they're doing. And the people like Bonnie was mentioning that usually come are retired architects or tech people that have made their money and now like, let me do something of good. I'm tired of building things that do things that I don't perceive as valuable. And it's kind of like, how do you tie both of them in? And it's a craft. So it's not something, it's something like a science. And I think for every organization or brigade, it's going to be different.
You've got another question too from Greg on Code for Miami and Code for Fort Lauderdale, Gregory.
Greg says, what's the deal with Code for Miami and Code for Fort Lauderdale's relationship?
I mean, we're one entity. I mean, Code for Fort Lauderdale was a meetup like LA. It's big in size, and it was just a good form of like merging. But because we're our own entity, it didn't make sense to start another 501c3 and call it something else, because that would take years. So for us, it's really just, hey, we're on board. We have Miami-Dade County and Broward, and we have a team of people sharing resources. I think it was just logical. It's like, hey, we're in the same place. We like each other. We trust each other. We've been working with each other for years. Let's solidify that and let's work concrete on plans. Because again, back to the practice-based model, if you're tackling affordable housing or tackling climate change and another city is like 20-minute or 30-minute or less than that drive away from you, it just makes sense to say, let's connect and share resources. We're getting grants, and we're making sure that the grants that we get, if possible, some of that funding goes to Code for Fort Lauderdale so it can keep them going. So that's our relationship. We've merged, and very happy to continue working with them. But I think it's a part of the sustainability plan and structure for this region.
Since I don't see any other questions, I'm curious who else is on the chat or who has been participating in the session that's part of Code for America that is facing similar challenges or desires. Greg, I know you're doing stuff down in DC, if you want to join in.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, I think we have a lot of the same challenges as a lot of people. I guess I will give a little bit of context. So we created several years ago, some of the people who had previously been involved in Code for DC set up a nonprofit called District Civic Labs to be the fiscal sponsor for Code for DC, but also potentially other things. And so there are two other groups that are a part of District Civic Labs now, although they are much, much, much smaller, or at least one of them is like a once-a-year event. We don't actually really work together, although that's maybe something we should think about. But yeah, all the challenges about like burnout and like people's time and like people disappearing is definitely a big challenge that we have as well. And like diversifying funding, like right now we're completely donation funded, which is challenging. Yeah, I don't know.
So Arthur mentioned something about Oregon and the brigades in Eugene and Portland. If you want to say anything, feel free. And then there's Michael, who says that he can say something about Open Oakland's leadership structure. We'd love to hear. And I guess just to be mindful of time, like, let's not go over another 5 minutes, I guess. Does that make sense to everyone?
I could offer something.
Cool.
Okay. So around 2013, there was a civic tech organization started in Portland called Hack Oregon, and they would work over a 6-month period with 6 different community partners. So this would involve volunteers working with open data, and this process introduced their organization to a lot of potential clients. That so it's a trust building over time, and then the projects that would get created in that 6-month period would be presented at a final event on stage, and they'd invite the whole community in. And it showed kind of like a proposal for work, and if the community partner wanted to invest in it, then it could develop further when the funding's there. And in Eugene, MVP Studios functions similar. They'll offer a analysis and like kind of evaluation of what can be built, and that work is all free. And then if the community partner has the resources to fund it, then they can go ahead. So I just wanted to share those models. Thank you.
Michael from Open Oakland.
Hi. So Open Oakland started as a typical brigade, I think, about the same time that NYC Beta and other folks got involved. I believe they had hopes to replicate NYC Data and become a nonprofit, but that fell apart before I really got involved. At a point that our original captains retired, the leadership became very unstable, and the folks who were active in the Hack Night came up with a new model, which is that rather than having a brigade captain that is sort of the oligarch, we have elections every year to elect 4 leadership positions, and then we invite and encourage project leads to join our leadership meetings once a month. We're now we've had our 4th election. Every election, new people have stepped up. Some people have carried over and been reelected, but this seems to be so far a rather stable model. Some folks after a year drop out of leadership. Some of them have even left Open Oakland. Others go back to hacking or whatever they were doing. But it just seems that having someone who's running, or a small group of people running everything, and then trying to get more people involved in that without an onboard ramp, which is, I see the encouraging project leads to come to leadership meetings, lets them understand what's at stake. A lot of those people, after they've been sitting on some meetings, run for office the next time. So we've found this to be pretty successful in sustaining leadership so far. That's about it.
Thanks.
All right. I don't see any more questions. Does anybody else want to chime in? Okay. Let's continue in the Slack channel. I think that this is great. And I know Bonnie, Gregory, Aaron, and I will likely be having a debrief session and potentially continuing having some sort of call or discussion in the months to come. It's been fun to chat with them in this process of preparing for a session at the summit. And I know we're looking to gain more and share more with each other. So if you'd like to join that, tell us in the Slack channel. Does anybody else want to add anything? You're welcome, Filson. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Kate, for proposing this and getting us all together, and Gregory for moving us online. Been fun.
It's been fun. And remember, guys, no one's coming. It's up to us.
That's right.
That is 100% true, Gregory. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.